Welcome to a brand new podcast series on coaching tools and approaches, brought to you by the Association for Coaching, the world's leading international professional body, which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Claudia, coach and entrepreneur and co-founder of The Growing Coaches. Research shows that certain approaches can be effective. However, it also shows that integrating more than one approach can be even more effective. I will be in conversation with experts and look in more detail at some of these approaches, what the research says, how coaches can apply it in their practice, as well as live coaching demos to understand better how the approach is put into practice. Our aim in this series is to bring you closer to the research and the information on a variety of approaches that you might like to put into practice. Welcome to Patricia Riddell, Professor of Applied Neuroscience. Her main research interest is the ways in which neuroscience can be applied in the business world, supporting and extending our understanding of human behavior. She's here today to tell us more about this approach. Before we start, do you want to tell the audience a bit more about yourself?
Thanks, Claudia, and lovely to be here with you. I'm an academic by training. I've been an academic for 30 years, and I still teach in a university. But about 12, 15 years ago, I suddenly realised that a lot of the information that I have about neuroscience and things that I've learned through my career have major applications in the real world. And that can be in leadership, it can be in coaching, it can be in teaching. There's a whole lot of ways in which this information is being used. And I think that was beginning to be appreciated at that point. But the people that were appreciating it were not neuroscientists. And often I would read stuff and I'd think, they've nearly got it, but it's not quite right. So I decided that a really good role would be to be the person that crossed that bridge between neuroscience and the real world and brought that neuroscience information into the real world. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 12 or 15 years, really thinking about the neuroscience, thinking about the problems that people have in the world and connecting the two together. And I spent a lot of my time training people, talking to people about what that means for them, and really helping people to understand what their brains are doing and why that's important to them.
Amazing. So in that note of trying to bring neuroscience more into other disciplines, of course, we as coaches, there's a lot we can introduce to our practice from neuroscience. So I was hoping you could tell the audience a bit more why we should care as coaches about neuroscience.
Well, there's a fundamental reason that coaches should care about neuroscience, and that's because they're dealing with people, and people have brains. And all of the ways in which we behave, or the majority of the ways in which we behave, we think, our emotional responses are all to do with the way that our brain is working. So I feel that if you were a coach that didn't know about neuroscience, it would be like a mechanic that doesn't know how a car works. Getting under the hood and actually seeing a little bit about what the brain is doing and in what ways it's evolved to work, I think are hugely helpful to understand how people take. And partly that's because the brain is not always doing what we think is intuitively obvious. So noticing the ways in which we think the brain works and then realising the way that it actually works, I think is so helpful.
I guess one of the questions that I had for the entire series was about the research that is behind each one of the approaches. In this case, it's very evident there is a lot of research, but I was wondering if you could translate a bit more to the audience some of the research behind this approach and it being used in coaching.
And I think that there's a really important point to be made here in that the use of neuroscience techniques in coaching, at the moment there's not a lot of evidence in that area. So approaches can either be evidence-based, we've tried it and here's the results, or they can be evidence-led. We know how the brain is working, and this tells us that this would be a better way of doing things. But we haven't actually measured what's happening in the brain when we're doing it with a client in the real world. So the first thing to say is that the neuroscience approach to coaching is evidence-led, not evidence-based. But having said that, there is so much work that's going on. Well, first of all, how do our brains learn? How do we remember? How do we make decisions? How do we create our own emotional response and understand the emotional responses of others? There is so much research that is going on in these areas that's helping us to unpick how the brain is processing in those particular concepts or areas. And that's directly applicable. And let me see if I can give you an example. So one of the fundamentals that I think is really like a bedrock of the things that I think are important for coaches to learn is the way that the brain changes. So if you've got a client who doesn't believe they can change, then they're not going to change because they're not going to try anything new. How do you persuade them that there are ways in which they can improve their performance or change their performance for the better? And the work that's now available both in neuroplasticity, we know that the brain is not only changing on demand, but changing before demand. So you're constantly replacing the connections in your brain on a daily basis, almost in order to have the capacity to learn something as it happens in the moment. We're not waiting for it to happen. We're putting the mechanism in place before it happens. And I think that's just, it's so hopeful. It's just great that, once you understand that, it's kind of like, oh, well, what do I want to learn today? Because I've got the capacity. How am I going to use it? Rather than how do I make my brain learn? You don't need to make your brain learn. So, there are things like that I think can change the way that individual clients approach the coaching process. And I think when they hear it's science, it's like, oh, well, if that's the way my brain's working, then of course I'll give it a go. Let's see what we can do with this. So there's something about helping people to understand the potential of their brain. And in some cases, why the brain is hindering them or stopping them doing things that I think can be very freeing.
Yeah, it's definitely encouraging to hear that. I guess I have my parents who tend to say, oh yeah, no, I'm getting older, so I can't learn that. And so it was nice as well to come with them with research and say, here, there's research that says you can. It might be slower than in kids or different than in kids, but it's still there as much as with me, with you. So definitely something to encourage. Can you expand a bit more on what you said about change before demand and not just on demand?
Okay, need to get a little bit technical. So the thing that we can change is the connections between neurons. So neuron is the fundamental cell that works in the brain. It carries electrical signals, and it uses that system to integrate information from different sources and then to pass that information to different parts of the brain. So the connections between neurons are hugely important. Some people will know the technical language. These are the synapses. And we build synapses on a moment-by-moment basis when we need to learn new information. So I'd always kind of assumed that once you built a synapse, it was there, and you would use it so long as you continued using it, it would stay there. So when I read a paper that pointed out that synapses actually are like skin. When you think about your skin, we don't have the same skin on a monthly or maybe a 6 or 8 weekly basis. We change all our skin. We're doing the same thing with synapses. We're constantly replacing them. That gives us flexibility. It means that if there is stuff that we're no longer using, we can filter that information out. It means we can forget things that are no longer useful. But it also means that we can build extra synapses where information becomes more important. And we know that information is important when it's repeated, but also when it comes with a big emotional impact. So those would be places where we build new synapses. So we're constantly replacing these synapses, and we're using information about, well, what's new today? What did I see yesterday that I'm seeing again today? What skills is somebody suddenly changing? It might be a new environment, a new job. What's changed about the behavior that then would require new synapses to build the pathways for that new behavior? So we're sculpting the brain on the basis of need. And in order to promote that sculpting, we're actually getting rid of synapses so that we're rebuilding them appropriately for today and tomorrow. rather than just depending on the synapses that we had yesterday.
It's a process that's happening naturally. And then we have, of course, the one on demand, which would be where the emotion comes in and where it's more that we want to learn something new.
And where the environment has pointed out that there's something new to learn by making it very emotional for us. Yes.
Great. If we think about us coaches who have an interest on neuroscience and want to include this in our practice, the way I see it is not becoming 100% a neuroscientist and becoming an expert on the field, but more having knowledge about the brain and how certain things work so that I can then introduce them in my practice, either by telling them about the theory and they can then change their perceptions about it, or by me knowing it and then I can apply different approaches based on that. Is there something else or some way you recommend that a coach goes about it?
Okay, so I agree with you, absolutely. In my own coaching, I will either share some information. And just to point out that can be a tricky thing for a coach, because you're going from a person-centered perspective to a teaching perspective. And so there's a real kind of skill in doing that with good rapport. So it's not just, I'm going to interrupt you here and tell you something that you didn't know. It's very much, I have some useful information that I would like to share with you. Is it okay if we stop here and let you have that information? And then repairing the rapport and making sure that it goes back to being person-centered once you've done it. So this, I think that's a really important point. If you're going to do this skillfully, you have to appreciate that that's a changing role that you're taking within the coaching process. But yes, I will definitely be helping my clients to understand what's going on in their brain, to give them more choice about what they want to do with that. And I also use it to think about, well, what is it that might be going on for them in their brain, and what question might I ask on the basis of that? The one thing that I would say about it, Claudia, and I think it's telling maybe that this is something that's just happened for you, is that this is a skill, it's not knowledge. So what you have learned to do is to appropriately use the neuroscience in an applied way. It's not about spraying people with information. It's about being very thoughtful about why would it benefit the person in this situation for them to have this knowledge. And I loved your distinction between things that they need to know and things that you need to know. And that's another skill, is recognizing the times when it will be helpful to somebody to say, can I interrupt you and let you know this? And recognizing the times where it just helps you to drive maybe a slightly different question that you would if you didn't have that knowledge. So it's a skill, and it requires practice. It requires knowledge, but it also requires that extra thoughtfulness and mindfulness about how you're applying it.
We had spoken about maybe doing a demo that could bring this alive. Would you want to do the demo now, or do you prefer to go through some examples of how you use that in practice or how you think about it?
I'm up for doing a demo, definitely. Is there a particular topic that you think might be useful here?
So one of them was something that I struggle to do tasks that are not admin tasks, like, for example, opening the mail. So it collects up and then I go and open it and spend some time, which is not the most ideal way. Or I have to now go and register a business in the Chamber of Commerce. And it's something that is a real drag, and I struggle to do it. And so things like that's basically, so that could be one and my goal would be that that this tendency stops and that I do it more on a regular basis as I do the rest of life. The other one was fear of riding a motorcycle. And because the other thing I was debating was, do I use the same topic with all the approaches just to see what is the difference between the different types of approaches? But it's all undecided yet. And then the other one was, since I have kids, it's more difficult to get things done. So finding flow used to be usually, and I used to be a morning person, but not sure if this is the case anymore. And so just thinking about this and how to make sure of still being effective, in this new stage in life.
I think we could maybe try a couple of these and then we can work out which one actually goes with it. So go back to your first one, this idea of how do I do tasks I don't want to do. So opening the mail or registering your company. So tell me a little bit about how it feels when you do that.
When my husband brings the mail in, because I already neglected from even before the mail comes in, from having to go. It will be, it feels heavy on the chest. Usually there is a sense of no satisfaction of doing it. There is also one of the thoughts that has come up as well is does it have to do with my capacity of achieving or getting it done quickly? So there's two things that come to mind as well, like time. It takes time. I don't have a lot of time. It's time that I don't see as valuable, even though it's something that needs to be done. So is it something about time? And the fact that, of course, I don't allocate enough, I don't allocate the time to it. But even when I have tried to put a space in my agenda to do it, I still struggle to actually keep to it. The other one, since I moved to the Netherlands, this has gotten stronger. And so when I think about having to open mail, and I'm using opening mail, but it of course relates to any admin task. When I think about opening mail in Netherlands, there's extra steps. I have to take the Google Translate. I have to translate the letter. There is different systems that I don't even understand. So, for example, getting the vaccinations of my kids, it's not just calling the GP and going and doing it like it was in England. It will be a different process, having to call somewhere else, having to wait, so efficacy somehow came to mind, as in, did it have to do with me not really thinking, or it being more challenging to actually get it done and knowing how to do it? Like with emails, for example, I used to get emails and I learned from someone who replies very quickly that actually maybe the easiest is, as I get them, I reply them. And so emails have stopped accumulating because I generally, there's two things happen. Either I open it and reply to it immediately, or I open it and it goes into my to-do list, which I look at it every day. And it will go to what task I need to do for the email or something like that. So so emails is not an issue. So then I guess that's where, and I did some coaching on it a while back. And the action I decided to take was to every day assign at 2:00 a spot where I do 15 minutes, because my idea, but I'll translate it even to the garden. Like I need to do the garden. And so my thinking is I would like to do every day a little bit, or every week a little bit, rather than let it accumulate. And then once a month, I have to spend 3 hours on the garden. It's that, how do I change that behavior from letting it accumulate and then taking it on a chunk of time, but rather do it on a regular basis?
I'm trying to think which way to do this. So I can either tell you what I think might be going on in your head, or I can try something and let's see what happens. Maybe let's do it this way. What language do you use when you talk about these tasks to yourself? So you've got the mail and it's sitting in front of you. What do you say?
It's probably Spanish.
Okay, well, you might have to translate it back, but in Spanish, what are you saying?
What a pain. I really don't want to do this.
Yeah, I don't want to.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
This might take time. But I think I've started introducing the time thing. I think before, but it's more I don't want to.
I don't want to. Okay. And yet you know that it has to be done.
Yes.
So
and I want it to be done.
You want it to be done. Interesting.
As in, I am someone who likes to have things under control, tidy, neat, and that is not tidy and that's not neat. And
okay, so that's really interesting. So there is a want there. It's not that you ought to do it; you want to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's also a fear, no? If I don't do it, then what happens? Right. So with the letters, of course, it can be something important. With the garden, for example, the grass may die, and then I have to plant new grass, and it goes on into other consequences of why.
Okay. So it seems to me that one of the things that you're doing is that you're setting yourself a goal that's not about approaching something better. It's avoiding the worst that might happen. So you're avoiding the grass dying. You're avoiding the male building up. And so when you're doing that, what you're doing is you're activating the amygdala, the bit of your brain that does threat. There's a threat to my nice, controlled, perfect world by not doing these things. Yeah. And because that's the threat, it's something that I should do in order to get my world back to normal again. Now, there are some people that just set all of the goals that way. There are other people that set some goals like that and some goals that are more approach goals, but goals about what can I fulfill in my life. I suspect that you're probably the latter. So do you have some things that you want to achieve that you've set yourself as positive goals that you're moving towards?
Yes.
Yeah. So there is that balance that some goals are approach and some goals are avoid.
Yeah. So probably family and professional are more of what I want to achieve and why it would be something good.
So you've set yourself approach goals in those areas, and you find those easier to fulfill than the avoid goals that you've set here. So there's two alternatives. One is that you have to remember that they're avoid goals and then frame the motivation to do them as an avoid motivation, or you can change them into approach goals. That's kind of the neuroscience. And typically I might not share that, but because of the kind of podcast nature, I thought that would be useful to what am I hearing, what am I thinking about here. One of the things that I might do with you is to suggest, tell me what a metaphor for the male is. When you think about that male, can you think of a visual or an auditory or some sort of metaphor? What's it like?
So it's raining at the moment. So the thing that came to mind was when it's raining and it's on grass, the grass absorbs it. However, when it's raining and it's on a roof or a surface that is pavement, that is not well hydrated and everything, would be that it gets accumulated and it forms a puddle. And so I guess my male, I see it more as a puddle rather than as rain falling on the grass.
Lovely. So we've got that puddle. Okay. Tell me one of the things where you've set yourself an approach goal, something that you absolutely love to do and you have no trouble at all spending your time doing that.
Could it be something simple like reading more books a year or eating more vegetables per year or something?
So that's like that. Easy to achieve. Absolutely. Yeah. You just do it and you don't think about it. It just happens.
Well, reading more books, it took me quite a while. So it's one of those of every year wanting to read more books as a novel. And I used to think I don't have enough time. I can't. And I'm not talking about professional books that will help me with my career. More like I love history novels. And I couldn't find the time. Eventually, I did find the time. And so once I found the time, it's a no-brainer to do it. And I've been now reading at least 5 history novels per year.
Because they're usually chunky too, aren't they?
Yeah. It doesn't sound like much, but going from 0 to 5 for me was a big improvement. And it did become an easy thing. And also because I think what has kept me going at it so much is how much I enjoy while I'm doing it.
And what's that like?
Relaxing.
No, as a metaphor.
As a metaphor. Mm-hmm. What would that be like? I'm thinking of waves and more like sound getting propagated. And it's a weird metaphor, but more like how sound goes through air, that it's something that happens organically and naturally, and it just flows.
Right. So it just flows and it's sound in the air, sound through air. Okay. So how could doing the mail be more like you sound through air?
If I have a smile on my face when it arrives, somehow feels like smiling could have an impact. Just because I'm thinking, if someone brings to me a cup of coffee, that will bring a smile to my face. So how can someone bring an envelope to me bring a smile to my face? And then while I'm doing the task, somehow waves in the air feel weightless, not so heavy. And so in the same way, how can while I'm talking, I'm trying to think, why does it feel so heavy? I mean, I'm thinking of picking up leaves from the garden. So that it's not something, and opening mail at the same time, and both feel equally heavy to my back. And there's where time comes in, as in, if I had all the time in the world, then spending 3 hours on the weekend, there's also tiredness, I guess. Would I feel less heavy about doing mail if I am less tired? But then I'm equally tired while I'm reading a book than while I'm opening mail. So why does it feel so heavy to do those tasks? And I don't necessarily, the answer is not really coming to me, but it has to do with weight.
Well, that's really interesting because you've got that physical sensation of weight, and that's interesting to see. So when you gave yourself the task of reading the history books, did you get this sense of weight when you first started trying to find the time for that?
Probably. The years that I wasn't achieving it, there was some of that. I guess there were a lot of things that came together. So good recommendations of books. So finding a good person who would recommend the books that I should read rather than me. I guess if I had to also look for the books rather than having a list of books that once I finish a book, I already almost know what's the next book, because I have some people around me who I've already identified, who have similar taste of books, who I just go and ask, which book should I read and next? Or I just say, I finished this one, which one should I read next? And I ask 3 people or so, and then it stops being the weight. Somehow that shifted the weight. Right. So there was that happened, good recommendations.
So let me just stop you there for a second, just in the nature of time. What's the equivalent of recommendations when you're doing the mail?
Support. So what kind of support can I have? Could it be that I tell my husband we're now going to do mail together every day for 10 minutes, or every week for, how on Mondays, the first thing we do after we take the kids to school is do mail, and we do it together, and it's more of a joint effort. That could work, actually. I can visualize that as something that could work. And until now, I've kept it always as a task. You do your mail and I do my mail, even though some mails are relevant to both. If I think about other things, it has, so when trying to eat healthier or something like that, getting him on board has helped as well. So that it immediately makes me feel lighter about
Interesting. it. Interesting. So more towards less of a puddle.
Less of a puddle. If I think about it, I've also started for organizing the house. I do it as an activity with the kids every day as part of and then of course the emotional weight of me doing laundry or me doing something that is very, I feel I'm not spending time with my kids. I'm not doing work. I'm not doing this. I'm doing, whereas when I do it with them, even if it's 10 minutes a day or so. And it's amazing how much you can get 4 people doing 10 minutes a day rather than yourself. It has helped because then it doesn't have that emotional negative side, which I guess I hadn't seen before. So
it's drawing you back from doing it. It's not just that you want the push. It's you want to get rid of that pulling back. Yeah.
Yeah. The emotional side, I guess.
The emotional side, absolutely. The other thing that just struck me when you were talking, Claudia, and that I'd share with you is I'm wondering about fixed and growth mindset in relation to all these things that you're having to learn. When you talked about the mail, you talked about all the things that happen as a result of opening the mail, the vaccinations and having to translate. And so there seems to me that there are some skills that you're learning as you're going and that those are hard work. Where's your mindset about that? Is it fixed or growth?
So that's a good point because I actually identify myself as having I used to have more of a fixed mindset, and I've tried to shift it towards a growth mindset. So there is a belief that I can learn it. There is, however, the thought that it's not an easy thing to learn. Absolutely. And that tends to go along with setting yourself goals that are overly ambitious or potentially not being willing to persevere or not having the right strategy. All of those can hold you back from that growth mindset. Do you see mail as a threat or an opportunity when it comes to learning Dutch or, doing the things learning about all these new systems? I don't think I see it as either.
Interesting.
So I don't see it as a threat because the things that are inside are not things that I am scared of or things that I would, like an example, for example, a simple one is getting my kids vaccinated for the right vaccine. And I have to now get into the system to know which one is the next vaccine they have. So it's not something that threatens in any way. There is a threat of not doing it because then they won't have the vaccine. So that's one of the reasons why I need to do it. I guess I don't, but on the other hand, when I think you used joy or
opportunity.
I can't remember which opportunity. So when I think of opportunity, I probably don't put any opportunity in. I also can't think of any opportunity of learning Dutch, of learning the system, of learning.
It's not an opportunity for you. And the other thing, again, just to reflect the language that you've been using, you talked about time.
I guess there, I do see it a little bit as a threat, as in it's taking away time from other things that I also need to do or that I want to do, or so there it could be a threat.
And how do you think about that? In all of these situations, they're probably neither only threat or only opportunity. There's both there.
I guess the question comes into how can I see more opportunity in it? To be honest, I'm struggling to come up with things. So I'm thinking maybe I need to talk to more people about how they see mail or how they approach mail or what they think about when they get mail.
And people that have the same level of challenge as you. I mean, this isn't just, me picking up mail in English and thinking, okay, what am I going to do with this? There's an additional level of complication there.
Yeah. I guess if I can try and see it, to me, mail has a negative connotation.
Right. So what could you call it instead?
Well, I'm trying to think, in Christmas time, I get cards, Christmas cards. I guess it also, in Venezuela, you don't have mail. So that's another thing. We don't do mail. So I didn't grow up with mail. But because it translates to other things, I think I'm not blaming it on that side or the change of culture or that. It's more the threat of time. And I guess there is a lot about trying to see the benefit of it at the end of it. So, for example, with a garden, if you have a pretty garden, then the kids can play. And so rather than thinking I have to do the garden so that the leaves don't kill the grass, I have to do the garden so that the kids can play outside in the garden and we can have a great family time. So trying to understand from people who actually enjoy doing mail, which I don't know how many are out there, but I'll find out how they see mail, or what excites them about mail, or what can excite someone about mail.
Maybe you need people to send you better mail.
Maybe I need to ask people to also send me good mail. So I'm not only
it's the nasty stuff. Yeah.
I think that's, I guess, something Venezuelans don't do.
Yeah. And so I'm just going to mention one other thing, because I think we've probably got enough here. The other thing that I'm hearing is the difference between the experiencing self and your future self. So when the mail arrives, it's not your future self that's opening it. It's your current self in the moment. And you're getting all of that nasty feeling about, that heaviness that you talked about. And the way that you can get rid of that is by giving all the work to do to your future self. But if you go and ask your future self how she feels about that, how does she feel about it?
She'll feel exactly the same way.
And what would she ask your current self to do?
She would ask my current self to produce the best circumstances in which to open the mail. Maybe a coffee, a good coffee, the support, the good view, and as you say, also the friendly mail alongside.
And the doing it with your husband was the other thing that you suggested.
Yeah, the support, yeah.
Support. So she would say, get your act together and find ways of doing it now rather than giving it all to me, please. Yes,
definitely, definitely.
And what benefit does she see in you doing it?
Well, more if I do it, then there wasn't that bad. I saved the energy and of those bad emotions and of having those negative thoughts and the dreading it and the time that my brain probably takes to the space it occupies in my brain that I have to do mail and I haven't done it. So freeing up of time as well, I guess.
Anything else?
I think I'm ready to try that one.
Okay.
I don't think my husband will be very happy that I'm suddenly dumping my mail on him as well. But yeah, I'm ready to try it.
Good. And when you're doing current self versus future self, one of the things that's important is your current self experiences reward more viscerally than your future self. So sometimes you have to bundle more reward into your future self, make it much more vibrant so that it's a chance of competing with your current self. So I'm feeling all this negativity, all this, I don't want to do it. How can I make the reward from my future self so vibrant that it's a no-brainer to do it?
Based on what you just said, so it's easier for my current self to feel emotion.
Yes, you can only imagine the emotion of your future self. You can experience the emotion of your current self. So it feels more vibrant, more visceral than imagining your future self.
Yeah. So the way for me to use that knowledge would be in two ways. One, with the emails, for example, when I'm doing it at the moment. If you do it in the moment, you're going with your emotion in that moment. So you don't have to do the effort of imagining the emotion. Yes. And then if I give myself the right circumstances, so like the coffee and the support of my husband and whatever it may be, then the positive emotion will be there for my future self.
The positive emotion will be there for your current self
as well.
Your future self. I mean, you talked about cleaning the leaves so that you had the garden free for the kids and you to play in. You talked about getting your kids vaccinated and it being done and, not having effectively, they're safe. Those are things that your future self will benefit from too.
Yeah.
So you can think both in terms of what sense of relief can I give my current self so that it feels okay to do the task, but also how can I think both in terms of what relief my future self feels in not having to do it, but also the benefits that I give to my future self by having done it already.
Yeah.
So there's two ways of building that sense of, this becomes a no-brainer. If I just get out of the way, look at all the benefits, and already I'm feeling better.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Patricia, for that. It's challenging to go from just being coached back to talking about it. It was interesting from a coachee experience. I could see you there, of course, giving me knowledge. And I was actually quite thankful to hear about the amygdala being triggered, and thinking that the last thing I want to trigger when I'm receiving mail is my amygdala. So it was definitely useful to have the information given to me. And I'm sure you can tell us of times in which you used it as well as information for you that you didn't share with me. There was a lot there. There was growth mindset. There were several things. So I guess one question that came out of that was, in contracting with your clients, how do you contract in a way where it allows them to ask as many questions as they want without feeling it's new knowledge in some ways, and they will have questions about it that may seem silly?
Oh, I think the first thing is I don't believe in silly questions. And so, I think one of the things you're asking is, how do you make it psychologically safe for somebody to gain that expertise without feeling that they're asking foolish questions? And my answer to that is, why would I expect you to know? And why should you expect yourself to know? So I'm very happy for my coachees to ask me questions at whatever level they think is appropriate for their learning, because I have no expectations of, or no judgment about whether they know it or not. It's just, if you know, then I can help. If you know, then it might give you a place to go from, a new piece of information that you can use in the future. If you don't know, then I'm in a position to help.
So I'm thinking there's two types of coaches. Coaches who will be, as yourself, very trained in neuroscience, and explicitly so trained in neuroscience. And so it's more obvious to the client that you'll be introducing concepts of neuroscience throughout the coaching. And there's other coaches more like me who will use neuroscience within their approaches, within their what they use in their coaching, but won't be neuroscientists as such. And so when you are introducing to the client, you'll be introduced with either case, you'll be introducing different concepts. So for example, slow thinking versus fast thinking, and the fact that you may do decisions on a slow with all the facts, and you want to have all the facts before you make a decision rather than following your intuition and then maybe asking a question that makes them go more into how are they feeling, what's their their first reaction towards it. And you might introduce these concepts without really them expecting it necessarily. So how do you contract for it on both cases?
So I think you're right. I think I start at an advantage because the very title that I have suggests that I might know something about the brain. And so I think I almost go in with permission. However, I absolutely believe that coaching works best when you are very eclectic with your approach to it. So I don't think there is a single approach to coaching that works. There'd be coaching sessions where I will talk about the neuroscience, and somewhere I'll be using something that's completely, a tool that I've picked up someplace else as well. So I think maybe in contracting, what I would think is appropriate is to say that there are a whole range of techniques that I've picked up over the years. Some of them are based on neuroscience, some of them are not. If there is something that I want to use that's neuroscience, and I think there's a piece of information in that would be helpful for you, do I have your permission to ask you if you want to know that at that point in time? And that way, it still maintains that sense of, it's not, I can make a suggestion, but I'm not telling you that you need to know this. It's just, here's something I think might be useful to you in the moment.
Makes sense.
And I think that's true of any coaching technique. I don't think that's just neuroscience.
Well, I guess it's more telling the client that you'll be drawing on different approaches, and some of them, like neuroscience, involves giving certain knowledge. And if they have any questions, to feel free to ask. And if they want to read more about it, to also tell you and to go deeper. In terms of technology, of course, technology now is in everything we do and is much more relevant in coaching. For this specific approach, how do you feel technology helps or hinders the approach?
It's a really good question, Claudia. And I guess it depends on the client or the person that you're coaching. So I could see things like if you're coaching somebody who has never come across some parts of the brain before, and it's like, well, what's the amygdala and what is it to me? Then it would be very easy just to pull up an app and show them, this is where your amygdala is, this is the kind of thing that it's doing for you, so that you could use technology in a way to be supportive of that learning that's taking place within the coaching process. So that's one way where I could see that it's helpful. I also spare one of these lying around, so that, sorry, I'm just showing everybody my brain. I'm just showing Claudia my spare brain. So, you could use that as a way of actually letting people understand what's going on, even if you're on Zoom or not doing face-to-face coaching. Much more difficult if you're doing it down the phone. Access to resources, access to videos that you can help people, you can point people to in order to show them what's happening. At the extreme, there are some organisations that are saying we can measure sufficient information about how your brain is working that we can tell you in the moment what's going on. I am not yet convinced by those technologies. I don't think that they have the nuance to be supportive at the moment. But I think that could happen.
So at the moment, it would be providing resources and things that the clients can read on their own. Also during the session, providing visuals and things that will support the knowledge that you are providing them. And then in the future, there might be an option of getting some reading done about the brain that could help on understanding to a deeper level, to a more real level, what is happening. Because in my case, for example, we're assuming that I'm activating my amygdala, but I guess actually understanding what is being activated when I get mail. And of course, there are things that are more important than mail.
Yes, exactly.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
In terms of groups and teams, how would you say it's different, or how do you apply it with groups and teams?
Well, one of the fundamental things that I believe about sharing this information in groups and teams is that one of the things that you're doing is providing a common vocabulary, a common way of thinking. When I first started sharing information about the brain with people, I kind of thought that I'd just be telling them about their brains and that would be it. But at the end of the first course that I ran on this, it came to me as a surprise that what I had achieved in some ways was an increase in compassion. And the reason that I think that happens is that there's almost this depersonalization. You can say somebody's brain is doing this rather than the person doing it. And when you do that, it's easier to forgive. It's easier to see, well, that's their experience. It's where they are to date. It's easier to help them, to help you to think about, well, what could I do differently that wouldn't trigger that in them? You get a sense of more control and a sense of caring and being compassionate about the people that you're working with. So you can do that at an individual level, but think about how much more powerful that is if you do it with a group or a team, because then you're all working from the same page. You all have that same information. It means that when you notice something, you can share what you're noticing in a way that's objective and not personalized. And it's just like, I think what's happening in the brain at the moment is this. I'm not telling you you're good. I'm not telling you you're bad. I'm just pointing out something that I think might be happening as a piece of information. And so that would be one of the reasons I think this would be absolutely important to do it with groups.
That's a very inspiring note to end up with, because compassion and forgiveness is something that makes society better. So definitely.
Absolutely.
And I guess that brought me as well to thinking about systems. And when you're coaching, you're always aware of the system. And so I guess in one-to-one, it's also then for the other stakeholders, understanding what could be happening for the other stakeholders.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. We're social animals. We don't work just on an individual basis. So being able to work with the system rather than just the individual, I think gives you more power as a coach.
Well, what final thought would you like to leave our listeners with?
So the final thought that I would like to leave the listeners with, I think there's two things. One is neuroscience is not complicated, but it can be easily misunderstood. So when you are looking for sources of neuroscience, check that they're credible. Try and learn your neuroscience from neuroscientists. And the second one is, it's not about the information, it's about applying it. So have a go. Think about what it might mean in terms of, try it on yourself first. Well, if that's what's happening for me, what does that allow me? What choice does that allow me? And what could I try that might be different from what I've been previously doing? See whether you feel that the applied neuroscience gives you more choice as a human being, and then apply that in your coaching to others. But it's a skill, and so learn not just the information, learn the skill too.
As a follow-up from the sources that you're mentioning, are there any books that you would recommend the listeners read or to get their feet on the water?
So I think, there's always the inevitable. There is a book that I wrote with colleagues at Henley called The Neuroscience of Leadership Coaching. And one of the things I like about it, if you skip forward to about I think it's the 4th, 5th, 6th chapters, what we've done is taken real coaching examples and tried to unpick what's happening in the brain during those situations, then giving you some tools that would fix that and told you why they think they might fix that. So if you want some real examples of how to apply, I think that would be a good place to start.
Perfect. Well, and where can our listeners find you if they want to contact you?
I'm on LinkedIn, so yeah, try there. I have 2 LinkedIn profiles. One's my academic one. I would suggest that people go to the one that says consultant neuroscientist.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been lovely to hear more about neuroscience, and hopefully the listeners can take some from the demo as well. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Claudia, I've got one question for you before you finish. How do you feel about mail at the moment?
Well, the metaphor about the waves is what comes to mind at the moment. And so when I have the visual image of me receiving a mail, I'm also seeing those waves. So, and that immediately makes it lighter. And I think my husband will be happy about it, but the thought of doing it with someone also brings the load down.
Fantastic.
So those things together help. I'm actually quite keen to test.
I'm keen to hear.
I'm almost like wanting mail to test how it goes with mail.
Fantastic.
Thank you for listening to another episode by the Association for Coaching. I have been Claudia Day. We hope this episode offers you some new insight and inspiration. For 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organizations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or explore our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. There, you can keep up to date with our latest episodes, enjoy the wealth of digital learning offerings, and gain insights from our Coaching Perspectives magazine.